Hi guys, my name is Matilda D'Orlando and I'm doing my presentation on starvation and famine. Alright, so some of the learning outcomes. After this lesson, students will have a better understanding of what starvation and famine is, why this occurs, the history behind it, who is affected and where, these countries where this is experienced, health outcomes associated with famine, and prevention methods. So before I jump into the learning outcomes that I just discussed, I want to go over a couple of facts and statistics so that you guys can keep in mind how severe this issue actually is globally. So greater than 20 million people facing this crisis of severe food insecurity are in the Horn of Africa. 20% of populations face extreme food shortages with limited ability to cope. Acute malnutrition rates exceed 30% for children under 5. So a lot of these individuals living in these areas aren't even able to make it past the age of 5 because of the shortage of food and the malnutrition that is caused by this. So 2 deaths per 10,000 people or 4 deaths per 10,000 children per day. So this just like puts into perspective how severe this issue really is. And we'll be talking more about that with the background information that I'm going to be presenting. All right, so now we're going to be diving into the actual topic that I'm going to be discussing today. So what is starvation and famine? Starvation is suffering or death caused by lack of food. And famine is the severe and prolonged hunger in a substantial portion of the population of a region or country. So this is more of on a global basis, like the populations that are being affected by this starvation. It's more of a bigger group of people as opposed to just like one person experiencing it. As far as famine goes, this usually lasts for a few months to a couple of years, and it's not indefinitely because if it was, it would just result in an overall extinction of that specific population. So why does famine occur? A question that I came across while I was doing my research was why this still is going on when we are obviously a lot more richer than we were in previous years and decades. So it's not solely due to lack of food. Yes, this is the major cause of why people are malnourished and are dying, but there are other factors that need to be considered when talking about famine because there are other ways that this does occur. It's not solely just due to no food. It could be caused by natural disasters. So if an area is hit with a drought or has crop infestations, this is a big component of that. There's lack of resources in the specific crops and whatnot. Unseasonably cold. So if there are crops that are trying to be produced and the region is too cold, it's going to result in them not being able to be made. Another factor too is insect infestations and plant diseases. So if we have an individual or a group of people that are spraying pesticides in the air for their crops, more than likely it could result in plant diseases that if you, is ingested, it could cause somebody to obviously pass away. Um, Economic collapses and loss of purchasing power. So this is really shown in the Indian famine of 1972, which is one of the famines that really came across in my research that I wanted to stress. So it really talks about that. So what I found interesting was that one of the most common causes of famine was human warfare, which makes a lot of sense because during wartime efforts, there is a decrease in resources, or the resources that we do have are geared towards the war. Warfare disrupts the distribution through the strategic use of siege and blockade tactics. It's also incidental in destruction of transportation routes and vehicles. So if you have a vehicle that gets destroyed during this wartime, it's going to result in not being able to be transferring food in and out of an area. So that's something to keep in mind that I didn't even really think of when uh, before doing my research on famine. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, an example of in history one of the famines that was caused by loss of purchasing power was the Indian famine of 1972. So this just goes to show that in history, famine and starvation has been, you know, a part of our history. It's not a new concept. And globally, starvation has been around for centuries, as I just mentioned. Here's a graph that shows the annual rate of people dying due to famine globally per decade. You could really see that in the 1870s, famine was a big thing that was going on as a health concern. And as you could see, it has decreased quite substantially, but it is still a big concern in our world today, and it's something that needs more attention. So some actual examples in history, the Chinese famine of 1959, which was from 1959 to 61, it resulted in 15 to 30 million deaths during that time frame. The Ethiopian famine of 1984 was from 1984 to 85, so it was only for a year, but it's crazy how 1 million deaths occurred from this. And not only did 1 million die, it affected 8 million people. So it's a big chunk of the population that was there that was affected by this, unfortunately. And then another one is the North Korean famine of 1995 to 1999. This is more of a recent famine that has occurred in our history, and it resulted in 2.5 million deaths. So this goes to show that famine and starvation is still a huge concern in our world today, and it needs more attention. And as you can see by the pictures provided to the right, what the physical outcomes are of this. So here provided, I have a short 6-minute video from ABC News addressing 4 countries that are facing famine and starvation. As I mentioned earlier, 20 million of these families, parents and children, are experiencing this. One of the countries being Somaliland. And in the video, they talk about the fact that there was a drought that occurred and it resulted in millions of people not being able to have any access to food. So it's really sad that the video go this about this video because it talks about all the issues that come with experiencing this drought, and it goes over also the kids and their weight and what they're supposed to be at. And it's really sad to hear that there's a bunch of them too that aren't even able to get the resources they need, like medical attention, because there's not enough beds in the hospitals for them. So take a look at this video and just it gives you a better idea and changes your perspective on how horrible this issue is and how it's still occurring globally. Where is starvation and famine occurring? Many of these countries are considered poor. So in the video we just watched, it was about an area in the Horn of Africa that is experiencing famine due to a drought. This is considered a third world or developing country. A developing country is a country with less developed industrial base with a low human development index. So um, due to the famine and starvation that these individuals are experiencing, there are a lot of these people dying off because there's not enough resources for them. These countries are poor agriculturally, and they seek to advance economically and socially for the greater good. 10, the top 10 hungriest countries, going from the most hungry to the, well, not least, but they're experiencing this. Um, Number 1 came in at Central African Republic. 2 is Yemen. 3 is Chad. 4 is Madagascar. 5 is Zambia. 6 is Liberia. 7 is Haiti. 8 is Timor-Leste. 9 is Zimbabwe. And 10 is Afghanistan. So, as I just mentioned, these are poorer countries that are in the third world, and they are experiencing this starvation and famine. This pictograph is from the Mercy Corps website, and I thought it was really interesting because it does go over the cycle of hunger that these individuals are experiencing. There are many ways hunger can be trapped. can trap people in a cycle of poverty and need. Here's how it can burden someone for a lifetime and pass it on to the next generation. So, when it comes to children, this starvation results in poor nutrition stunts and physical and mental development. So, these kids aren't even getting the proper nutrients they need to grow properly. Families, poor health during pregnancy leads to an undernourished child. So a lot of these children don't even make it into the world, resulting in the starting the cycle again. They're coming into this world with not the proper tools and nutrition that they need. So unhealthy pregnancies really are a huge factor of this hunger. The health problems with the youth, chronic health problems keep kids out of school, so they're not even getting the education that they deserve to have. So they don't even know what they are supposed to be experiencing or not supposed to be experiencing as far as food. This is all they know. Um, in adults, a lack of education that they weren't able to attain in their youth limits them to get work. And the cycle of hunger continues just because of um, how it's burdened somebody over a lifetime. Health outcomes associated with starvation. So obviously, with lack of food, it's going to result in a lot of health outcomes that are very negative. So one of these being micronutrient deficiency diseases. And here are a couple, as well as there being a lot more. Um, so the first one is vitamin A deficiency, which is due to lack of vitamin A. This can result in xerophilathmia, which is an abnormal dryness of the conjunctiva and cornea of the eye. So a lot of these individuals that are developing this deficiency are going blind due to not having the vitamin A that they need. Vitamin C deficiency. So one of the symptoms that come with this is scurvy, which you could see the diagram next to um, this. It says loss of teeth, pale skin, sun-keen eyes. So it's characterized by swollen bleeding gums and the opening of previously healed wounds, which can result in an infection if exposure to dirt or bacteria gets in there. Niacin deficiency is thick, scaly, pigmented rash on the skin exposed to sunlight. Swollen mouth and bright red tongue. So a lot of these individuals in these areas are exposed to the sun quite often, and this is in turn giving them this type of deficiency. Anemia is the hunger for strange substances, and this is what's really seen with this is the ingestion of dirt as a means of food because a lot of these individuals are so starving that they're willing to eat anything. Their brain is making them just feast on anything that they can ingest or put into their mouth. And there are a lot of other micronutrient deficient diseases as well as the ones that I just listed. So here's a picture that I really wanted to insert because it really goes to show how starvation is really affecting an individual, especially when they are younger than the age of 5, as I mentioned earlier. So to the far left is what a normal child should look like, their normal weight and height. The second one is wasted. So they're thinner than normal, but they're not as bad as with them being wasted and stunted. So as far as stunted goes, is they're shorter than normal. Uh, when somebody is wasted and stunted, they are thinner and shorter than normal, which is obviously very unhealthy. So this diagram really puts into perspective how, as I mentioned, hunger is affecting not only the person's like immunity, but their actual physical appearance. Making a change. This graph depicts the depth of food deficiency, kilocalories per person per day in 2015. The depth of food deficiency indicates how many calories would be needed to lift the unnourished from their status, everything else being constant. This is calculated by estimating the total food deficiency in the country, then normalizing by the total population to give a per capita measure. So the areas with the darkest red, they would need the most calories, and the areas that are a lot lighter would need less. So as far as prevention methods go to ensure that there is no more hunger in this world, there are many different programs that collect donations for funding towards feeding the starving. The World Health Organization also does a lot of programs that are for the services of individuals that are experiencing hunger. Service trips to starving areas, volunteering. So there are these things called mobile pack events where individuals are able to get into a group and create different food packages to be shipped globally to those in desperate need. And I wanted to include a link for one that where you could sign up for. And then the Mercy Corps have our holistic approach to hunger. This goes as follows. So, women's empowerment, fostering an environment that supports women's independence and income earning potential, because in a lot of these areas, women still are not experiencing the same equal rights as men. Agriculture, connecting farmers to the resources they need to grow healthy crops and boost their incomes. So in the video, they talked again about how a lot of these areas are in droughts, which is in turn not being able to make the crops that they need. Sustainability, helping communities manage the resources to improve crop and livestock production. So that goes with the agricultural component of that. Good governance, working with local governments and communities to develop just and inclusive policies. And health and nutrition, improving community hygiene, clean water access, and knowledge about nutrition. So I have a couple discussion questions for you guys to answer. Why does famine happen? Why does famine happen today when the world is so rich? Do you think in the future people dying of hunger will be a thing of the past? What can we do to prevent this issue? And would you be interested in being a part of a service trip somewhere? If so, where would you want to go first and why? This concludes the end of my presentation. Thank you guys so much for listening. Here are my resources and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.